In the quiet, lush gardens of Ethos, the Zephyrians once believed themselves untouched by the dark forces of the galaxy. They were an advanced civilization, renowned for their art, their science, their peace. But peace is a fragile thing, one that can shatter with the cold, unrelenting strike of war. The Razak Dominion, ruthless and merciless, arrived without warning, their demands clear: submit or perish. The Zephyrian Council hesitated, unsure of what to do. In their desperation, they made a fateful decision, one that would alter the galaxy forever. They sent an SOS, a distress signal, into the vast unknown, knowing only one thing: they had no military. And they had no choice. They called out, but the universe would not answer with the aid they expected. Instead, they awoke a force more terrifying than they ever could have imagined, a force known as the Deathworlders. And as the crimson fleet of humanity's fiercest warriors descended upon their world, the Zephyrians would learn the true cost of calling for help. When paradise burns. The twin suns of Ethos cast their golden light across crystal spires that reach toward the heavens like frozen music. Dr. Linnea Voss stood on the observation deck of the Grand Academy, watching the morning mist rise from the singing gardens below. Her pale blue skin shimmered with the natural bioluminescence that marked her as one of the Zephyrian people, and her large violet eyes reflected the peaceful world she had known all her life. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrians had lived in harmony on their garden world. They were philosophers, artists, and scientists who had unlocked the secrets of matter manipulation and energy cultivation. Their cities floated on platforms of crystallized air, connected by bridges of pure light. War was a concept so foreign to their nature that they had no word for it in their ancient language. That morning would be the last time Linnea saw her world at peace. The emergency klaxon shattered the tranquil silence. Its harsh tone had never been heard before on Ethos, a sound so alien that many Zephyrians simply stood frozen, unable to comprehend its meaning. Linnea pressed her elongated fingers against the observation window as massive shadows fell across the singing gardens. Above them, descending through the atmosphere like dark meteors, came ships of a design that spoke of violence and conquest. Their hulls were angular and scarred, bristling with weapon systems that had never been needed in Zephyrian space. These vessels belonged to the Razak Dominion, an expanding empire that measured progress in subjugated worlds and enslaved populations. All citizens must evacuate to designated shelters immediately, announced Elder Korvac through the city's communication network. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through centuries of guiding his people through peaceful challenges, but now it trembled with uncertainty. This is not a simulation. Repeat, this is not a simulation. Linnea ran through the Academy's corridors as explosions began to rock the floating city. The Razak bombardment started with precision strikes against communication arrays and power generators. They had done this before on dozens of worlds, following a practiced strategy of breaking their victims' ability to coordinate resistance. In the emergency council chamber, Elder Korvac stood before a holographic display showing the positions of enemy vessels. The chamber itself was a marvel of Zephyrian architecture, its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Around the circular table sat the 12 members of the Planetary Council, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with stress and fear. "Report from the orbital defense platforms," requested Council Member Theron, his usually melodious voice tight with concern. "There are no orbital defense platforms," replied Communications Director Yala. "We dismantled the last of them 800 years ago when we achieved interstellar peace with our neighbors." The brutal reality struck the Council like a physical blow. The Zephyrians had evolved beyond conflict, achieving a level of civilization that seemed to transcend the need for military capability. They had forgotten that the galaxy contained species that viewed such evolution as weakness rather than achievement. General Thane of the Razak Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Conquest, studying the peaceful world below. His species had evolved from apex predators on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. Their gray skin was naturally armored, their claws designed for rending flesh, and their yellow eyes adapted for hunting in perpetual twilight. "Beautiful world," observed his tactical officer, Commander Vex. "The resources alone will fund expansion for decades." Thane nodded, his scarred face showing no emotion. He had conquered 47 worlds in his career, each victory adding to the Dominion's power in his own legend. The Zephyrians would be among the easiest conquests, their advanced technology offset by their complete inability to defend themselves. "Open communication channels," Thane commanded. "Let's offer them the choice between submission and extinction." Back in the council chamber, Linnea watched as Elder Korvac received the transmission from the enemy fleet. The main display showed General Thane in his command armor, flanked by Razak warriors whose very appearance spoke of violence and domination. "I am General Thane of the Razak Dominion," the alien warlord announced. "Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You have one planetary rotation to surrender unconditionally. Submit, and your people will serve as laborers in our expansion. Resist, and every living thing on your world will be eliminated." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. For beings who had spent millennia resolving conflicts through reason and compromise, the concept of such absolute ultimatum was nearly incomprehensible. "We could attempt to negotiate," suggested Council Member Theron. "Perhaps offer them some of our technology in exchange for autonomy." "They don't want negotiation," Linnea said, her voice cutting through the discussion. As a xenobiologist, she had studied the behavioral patterns of various species across the galaxy. "Look at their ship designs, their military organization. This is a predator species that respects only strength." Elder Korvac's bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress. "Then what do you suggest?" "We have no military, no weapons capable of threatening such vessels." Linnea accessed her personal datapad, calling up classified files from her research into galactic civilizations. The information she displayed sent ripples of unease through the council chamber. "There is one option," she said carefully. "We could send a galaxy-wide distress signal. Some species might respond." "And invite more conquerors to our world?" Elder Korvac protested. "The cure could be worse than the disease." Linnea highlighted a specific section of her research. "There are rumors of species in the galactic rim regions, worlds that other civilizations avoid, marked as quarantine zones. The reports suggest inhabitants so dangerous that even aggressive empires like the Razak won't approach their territories." Council Member Varen leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying the data. "You speak of the legendary Deathworlders, beings so violent and unpredictable that they're considered a galactic threat." "Legends often contain truth," Linnea replied. "If such species exist, they might possess the capability to challenge the Razak Dominion. The question is whether they would help us or simply replace our current oppressors." The debate continued as explosions rocked the floating city. Through the crystal walls, they could see Razak dropships deploying ground forces in the lower districts. Smoke rose from burning buildings as civilians fled in panic toward evacuation centers that offered no real protection. "The decision must be made now," Elder Korvac declared. "Do we die as free beings or gamble our fate on unknown aliens who may be even worse than our current attackers?" The vote was close. 7 council members supported sending the distress signal, while 5 opposed it. Elder Korvac cast the deciding vote, his bioluminescent patterns showing the weight of responsibility he carried. "Send the signal," he commanded. "May the ancestors forgive us if we doom our people to an even worse fate." The transmission array in the Academy's highest spire activated with desperate urgency. The quantum message burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying the Zephyrian's plea across thousands of light-years. Most civilizations would ignore it, unwilling to risk conflict with the Razak Dominion. But in a remote corner of the galaxy, in a system marked with warning beacons and quarantine alerts, the signal reached its most fateful destination. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in the Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting the 4th planet of the Sol system. The facility was humanity's ear to the galaxy, listening for signals that might indicate threats to Earth or opportunities for peaceful contact. As a communications specialist with 15 years of experience, Elena had heard thousands of transmissions from across the stars. Most were routine commercial traffic or diplomatic exchanges between established civilizations. Occasionally, she intercepted military communications that provided intelligence about galactic politics. But this transmission was different. The desperation in the alien voices cut through the translation algorithms with raw emotion. "Commander Torres," Elena called to her supervisor. "You need to hear this." Commander Miguel Torres approached Elena's station, his weathered face bearing the scars of humanity's expansion into space. He had fought in the Lunar Rebellion and the Mars Colonial Wars, experiences that had taught him the value of preparation and the cost of peace. The translated message played through the station's speakers, carrying Linnea's voice across the void. "This is Dr. Linnea Voss of the Zephyrian Scientific Council on Ethios. Our world is under attack by the Razak Dominion. We are a peaceful civilization with no military capability. Billions of innocent lives hang in the balance. We broadcast this message to any species capable of providing assistance. Please, if there is any justice in the galaxy, help us. Torres listened to the message 3 times before making his decision. In the years since humanity had achieved interstellar flight, they had maintained a policy of careful observation. Earth's governments were still debating when to reveal human presence to the galaxy at large, but some situations transcended policy. Forward this to Fleet Command immediately, Torres ordered. Priority Alpha classification. The message reached Admiral Marcus Kane aboard the orbital command station above Earth. Kane was a veteran of humanity's bloodiest conflicts, a man who had seen civilization balanced on the edge of extinction and pulled back through determination and sacrifice. His gray eyes held the wisdom of someone who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. The Admiral studied the tactical analysis of the Zephyrian situation. Long-range sensors had tracked Razak fleet movements toward their system, confirming the aliens' desperate message. Intelligence reports described the Razak as a typical expansionist empire, technologically advanced, but predictable in their brutal efficiency. Admiral, reported his aide, Commander Sarah Chen. The Crimson Fleet is ready for deployment. 36 vessels including the dreadnought Retribution and the carrier Valkyrie. Kane nodded slowly. The Crimson Fleet represented humanity's most advanced military assets, ships and crews trained for the possibility of interstellar conflict. Their existence had been kept secret from most of Earth's population, a necessary precaution in a galaxy filled with unknown threats. Signal the fleet commanders, Kane decided. Mission briefing in 2 hours. We're going to war. In the briefing chamber aboard the Retribution, Kane addressed the assembled captains and commanders. These were humanity's elite military officers, men and women who had trained their entire careers for the day when Earth might face existential threats. Ladies and gentlemen, Kane began, his voice carrying absolute authority, we have received a distress call from a peaceful civilization under attack by aggressive conquerors. Intelligence indicates the enemy possesses significant military capabilities, but their tactics suggest they've never faced opponents willing to fight back effectively. Captain Sarah Mitchell of the destroyer Nemesis raised her hand. Admiral, what are our rules of engagement? The aliens don't know we exist. Kane's expression hardened. Our mission is to protect innocent life and demonstrate that aggression against peaceful civilizations will not be tolerated. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity exists, and our first impression will define our future relationships. The Crimson Fleet launched from Earth's orbital shipyards with deadly purpose. Their vessels cut through space with efficiency born from decades of technological advancement and military doctrine refined through bitter experience. Humanity had learned from their own violent history, developing weapons and tactics designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. As the fleet entered hyperspace, racing toward the distant Ethos system, Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship. Through the observation windows, he could see the other vessels of his command maintaining perfect formation. Each ship carried the hopes of a species that had chosen to reveal itself through an act of protection rather than conquest. Admiral, reported the navigation officer, estimated arrival at the Ethos system in 18 hours. Kane nodded, his thoughts turning to the Zephyrians who were fighting for survival light years away. They had called for help from a galaxy that had abandoned them. Now they would discover what happened when Deathworlders answered that call. The fate of 2 civilizations hung in the balance as humanity prepared to announce its presence to the galaxy in the only way it knew how: by standing between the innocent and those who would destroy them. The Zephyrians had wished for salvation. They were about to learn that sometimes salvation came with claws bared and weapons hot, delivered by a species that understood that peace could only exist when good beings were willing to fight for it. Deathworlders unleashed. The first sign of the human fleet's arrival was a series of gravitational anomalies detected by Razak sensors at the edge of the Ethos system. General Thane stood on the bridge of the Iron Conquest, studying the readings with growing concern. His tactical display showed 36 unknown vessels dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their energy signatures unlike anything in Razak databases. Analysis, Thane commanded, his clawed hands gripping the command rail. Unknown configuration, General, reported his sensor officer. Hull materials appear to be some form of enhanced metals. Weapon signatures are unusual. They don't match any known galactic technology. Through the observation ports of the floating city, Dr. Linnea Voss watched the distant flashes of light that marked the arrival of their potential saviors. The emergency council had gathered again in their crystal chamber, hope and terror warring in their bioluminescent patterns. Incoming transmission, announced Communications Director Yala. It's from the unknown fleet. The holographic display activated, showing a figure that made several council members step backward in shock. The being appeared roughly humanoid but with predatory features that spoke of evolutionary violence. Dark hair framed a face marked by scars, and steel-gray eyes held the cold intelligence of a natural hunter. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Federation Navy," the alien announced. "We received your distress call, Dr. Voss. We're here to help." Elder Korvac struggled to find his voice. The being before them radiated controlled violence in a way that made even the Razak seem tame by comparison. We are grateful for your response, Admiral Kane. But we must warn you, the Razak Dominion has 47 warships in our system. Kane's scarred features shifted into what the Zephyrians would later learn was a human smile. It was not a reassuring expression. "We're aware of the tactical situation. Recommend you maintain shelter protocols while we deal with the current occupants." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Communications Director Yala pulled up long-range sensor data, her hands trembling as she processed the information. "The human vessels are moving into attack formation," she reported. "Their approach vectors suggest advanced tactical coordination." General Thane received his own intelligence reports with growing unease. The unknown ships had positioned themselves with mathematical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to support each other while minimizing friendly fire incidents. It was a level of tactical sophistication that spoke of extensive combat experience. "All ships to battle stations," Thane commanded. "Deploy in defensive formation around the planet. We'll use the Zephyrians as shields while we assess these newcomers' capabilities." The Razak fleet moved with practiced efficiency, their 47 vessels forming a protective sphere around Ethios. It was a strategy that had worked on dozens of worlds, forcing attackers to risk civilian casualties while the Dominion's forces maintained tactical advantage. Admiral Kane studied the enemy deployment from the bridge of the Retribution. His tactical officers fed him continuous updates on Razak ship positions and weapon capabilities. The enemy had made a critical error by clustering around the planet, limiting their maneuverability while creating a target-rich environment. "Signal the fleet," Kane ordered. "Implement Thunderstrike protocol. Primary objective is neutralizing enemy combat capability while minimizing civilian casualties. Any ship that fires on population centers is to be destroyed immediately." The human fleet split into 3 attack groups, each approaching from a different angle. The formation was designed to create confusion among the enemy while maintaining overwhelming firepower concentration at critical points. It was a tactic born from humanity's long history of warfare, refined through conflicts that had tested their species' survival. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the destroyer group that struck first. Her 3 vessels emerged from the asteroid belt like hunting wolves, their stealth systems masking their approach until the final moments. The lead Razak cruiser detected them just seconds before the first human weapons fired. The impact was devastating. Human plasma cannons operated on principles that bypassed traditional deflector shields, while their kinetic projectiles struck with the force of small meteors. The Razak cruiser's hull cracked like an eggshell, atmosphere venting in crystalline clouds as its crew struggled to comprehend what had hit them. "Impossible," breathed Commander Vex aboard the Iron Conquest. "Their weapons output exceeds theoretical maximums." General Thane watched 3 more of his ships disappear from the tactical display in rapid succession. The humans fought with a combination of technological superiority and tactical aggression that he had never encountered. Their vessels moved through his formations like predators among prey, striking precisely where his defenses were weakest. "All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship," Thane ordered desperately. "If we can break their command structure, the others might withdraw." 20 Razak vessels turned their weapons toward the Retribution, unleashing enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Energy beams and missile salvos converged on the human dreadnought in a display of destructive force that should have vaporized any ship in known space. The Retribution emerged from the barrage with only minor hull scarring. Admiral Kane barely felt the impacts through his ship's advanced armor and defensive systems. Human engineering had been forged in the crucible of interplanetary war, creating vessels designed to absorb tremendous punishment while continuing to fight. The Razak bombardment had been impressive by galactic standards, but inadequate against Deathworlder technology. "Return fire," Kane commanded calmly. "Target their command ship." The Retribution's main guns spoke with the voice of controlled nuclear fusion. Twin beams of coherent energy lanced across space, striking the Iron Conquest with surgical precision. The Razak flagship's shields collapsed instantly, its armor plating melting like butter under the assault. General Thane felt his ship dying around him as human weapons tore through deck after deck. Emergency klaxons wailed while his crew abandoned their stations in panic. Through the smoke and sparks, he could see the tactical display showing more of his fleet being systematically destroyed. "General, the humans are hailing us," reported his communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kane once again. But now the human's expression held no mercy, only the cold determination of a predator that had cornered its prey. "General Thane," Kane said quietly, "your fleet is beaten. Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting and watch them die for nothing." Thane looked around his ruined bridge at the officers who had followed him through dozens of campaigns. Many were wounded, all were afraid. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made continued resistance suicide rather than warfare. We surrender," Thane said, the words bitter in his mouth. But surrender would not end the battle. Even as the space engagement concluded, Razak ground forces were already deployed across Ethos. Thousands of Dominion soldiers occupied key cities and strategic facilities, holding Zephyrian civilians as unwilling shields against orbital bombardment. Sergeant Maria Santos led the first human landing force to touch Ethos soil. Her combat armor was scarred from a dozen conflicts, its systems adapted for the harsh realities of ground warfare. Behind her, 24 human Marines moved through the singing gardens with weapons ready and senses alert. The contrast between the humans and their surroundings was stark. The Zephyrian city floated on platforms of crystallized air, its architecture designed for beauty rather than defense. Gardens of singing plants created natural music that had been silenced by the sounds of combat and the acrid smoke of burning buildings. "Sergeant," reported Corporal Davis through the team's communication network, "I have eyes on Razak positions in the Academy District. Estimate 40 hostiles using civilians as cover." Santos studied the tactical situation through her helmet's display. The Razak had positioned themselves in buildings filled with non-combatants, calculating that attackers would hesitate to risk innocent lives. It was a strategy that worked against conventional military forces but showed a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. "All units, remember your training," Santos commanded. "We don't leave innocents to die because the enemy lacks honor." The human assault began with precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each Marine had trained for years in close-quarters combat, their reflexes enhanced by genetic modifications that pushed human physical capabilities to their absolute limits. They moved through the occupied buildings like ghosts, neutralizing Razak positions with surgical strikes that left civilians unharmed. Dr. Linnea Voss huddled in a reinforced shelter beneath the academy as explosions echoed through the building above. The sounds were different now, sharper and more controlled than the Razak bombardment. Someone was fighting room by room through her facility, engaging the occupying forces with methodical precision. The shelter door exploded inward in a shower of crystal fragments. Linnea pressed herself against the far wall, expecting to see Razak soldiers come to drag her away for interrogation. Instead, a figure in powered armor stepped through the opening, weapon lowered in a non-threatening posture. "Dr. Linnea Voss?" the figure asked in accented but understandable Zephyrian. The voice was female, filtered through electronic systems but carrying an underlying warmth. Yes," Linnea stammered. "Are you human?" The armored figure reached up and removed her helmet, revealing features that were both alien and somehow familiar. The woman's dark skin bore ritual scars, and her brown eyes held depths of experience that spoke of a lifetime of conflict. But there was also compassion there, a quality that transcended species boundaries. "Sergeant Maria Santos, Terran Federation Marines," the human said. "We're here to get you out of this mess." As Santos led Linnea through the Academy's corridors, the Zephyrian scientist witnessed human combat effectiveness firsthand. The Marines moved with coordinated precision that made military action look like art. They communicated through subtle hand signals and electronic whispers, flowing around obstacles and through enemy positions like water finding its path. In the main laboratory, they found 12 Zephyrian researchers held at gunpoint by Razak soldiers. The enemy had calculated that the humans would hesitate to risk civilian casualties, a fatal miscalculation of Deathworlder psychology. The firefight lasted exactly 14 seconds. When the shooting stopped, all 6 Razak soldiers were down while the Zephyrian hostages remained unharmed. The humans had shot with inhuman precision, their enhanced reflexes and advanced targeting systems allowing them to engage multiple targets simultaneously without risking innocent lives. "How is that possible?" Linnea whispered, staring at the scene. "Practice," Santos replied grimly. "Lots and lots of practice." Similar engagements played out across Ethos as human forces systematically eliminated Razak ground positions. The Dominion soldiers, trained for conventional warfare against species that fought by galactic standards, found themselves facing opponents who operated by entirely different rules. In orbit, Admiral Kane coordinated the ground assault while processing intelligence reports from the surface. His Marines were encountering minimal resistance as Razak forces either surrendered or fled rather than face destruction. The enemy had learned the hard way that humans did not make idle threats. "Admiral," reported Commander Chen, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple Razak outposts throughout the sector. They're requesting permission to withdraw from Zephyrian space." Kane nodded with satisfaction. The demonstration of human military capability was having its intended effect. Word would spread throughout the Razak Dominion, and beyond that, there was a new power in the galaxy, one that fought for principles rather than conquest. "Grant their request," Kane decided, "but make it clear that any Razak vessel detected in this system again will be destroyed without warning." As the last Razak ships departed Ethos, leaving their defeated ground forces to face human justice, the true scope of the engagement became clear. In less than 6 hours, a fleet of 36 human vessels had defeated 47 Razak warships, while simultaneously conducting planetary liberation operations that rescued thousands of civilians. Dr. Linnea Voss stood in the Academy's highest tower, watching human dropships ferry wounded Razak prisoners to medical facilities. The irony was not lost on her that the same beings who had fought so efficiently were now providing medical care to their defeated enemies. "Why?" she asked Sergeant Santos, who had remained to coordinate security operations. "Why save those who would have killed you?" Santos looked out at the floating city, its crystal spires reflecting the light of Ethos's twin suns. The singing gardens were beginning to play their natural music again as emergency systems restored power and atmospheric processors cleared the smoke from the air. "Because that's what separates us from them," Santos replied. "We fight to protect life, not to destroy it. Even our enemies' lives have value once they're no longer a threat." The concept was revolutionary in a galaxy where might typically made right and conquered populations faced slavery or extinction. These Deathworlders fought not for territory or resources, but for ideals that transcended species boundaries. As news of the Battle of Ethos spread across galactic communication networks, species throughout known space began to reconsider their assumptions about the quarantined regions. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that rivaled the greatest military powers while showing restraint that contradicted every story about Deathworlder savagery. In the council chamber, Elder Korvac addressed his fellow Zephyrians as they began the process of rebuilding their world. The crystal walls still bore scars from Razak weapons, reminders of how close they had come to extinction. "We sent our call for help into the void, not knowing who might answer," he said, his bioluminescent patterns reflecting gratitude and wonder. "We feared that our saviors might be worse than our oppressors. Instead, we discovered that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, there are those who will fight for justice." But the victory at Ethos was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, other species had noted humanity's intervention with interest, fear, and in some cases, desperate hope. The balance of power that had existed for millennia was shifting, and not everyone would welcome the change. The humans had answered one call for help, but soon they would discover that revealing their existence to the galaxy meant accepting responsibility for protecting all those who could not protect themselves. The Deathworlders had emerged from their quarantined system, and the galaxy would never be the same. What heroes cost? 3 months after the Battle of Ethos, the ripple effects of humanity's intervention had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the depths of space aboard the research vessel Harmony, Dr. Linnea Voss worked alongside her new human colleagues, analyzing data that would reshape galactic understanding of interspecies cooperation. The ship itself was a marvel of combined technology. Zephyrian crystal matrices enhanced human computing systems, while human metallurgy reinforced delicate Zephyrian energy conduits. It was a fusion that represented something entirely new in galactic politics, voluntary cooperation between species with vastly different capabilities. "The medical data is fascinating," observed Dr. Sarah Chen, the human xenobiologist who had become Linnea's closest collaborator. "Your people's natural bioluminescence responds to emotional states in ways that could revolutionize psychological therapy." Linnea's skin patterns shifted to pleased golden hues as she studied the comparative analysis. "And your species' genetic adaptability suggests evolutionary pressures we can barely comprehend. How did humanity survive on such a hostile world?" "By becoming more hostile than the world itself," Chen replied with dark humor. Evolution doesn't create saints, Dr. Voss. It creates survivors. Their research was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Admiral Kane aboard the Retribution. The human fleet had remained in the Ethos system, officially for ongoing security operations, but actually serving as a deterrent against future aggression. The Admiral's scarred features appeared on the communication screen with obvious concern. Dr. Voss, we're receiving multiple distress signals from across the galaxy, Kane reported. 17 different species requesting assistance against various aggressors. Word of our intervention here has spread further than we anticipated. Linnea felt her bioluminescent patterns shift to worried blue. How many of these requests are legitimate? All of them, as far as we can determine. The galaxy apparently contains more oppressed civilizations than we realized. The question is how we respond without overextending our resources. The problem was more complex than simple military intervention. Each distress call represented millions of lives hanging in the balance, but humanity's fleet assets were limited. They could not be everywhere at once, and attempting to police the entire galaxy would lead to inevitable failure. On Earth, President Maria Rodriguez stood before the United Nations Assembly, addressing representatives of every human nation and colony. The revelation of galactic civilization had shocked humanity, but the news that they were apparently among the most militarily capable species had created a crisis of conscience. We face a choice that will define our species' future, Rodriguez announced to the packed assembly hall. We can retreat to our system and ignore the cries for help, or we can accept the responsibility that comes with our capabilities. The debate that followed would rage for weeks. Some argued that humanity's first obligation was to protect Earth and its colonies. Others insisted that ignoring genocide and slavery made them complicit in the galaxy's suffering. The decision would ultimately reshape both human society and galactic civilization. Meanwhile, the consequences of the Battle of Ethos continued to unfold across known space. In the Razak capital system, Supreme Commander Vortex studied intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of their defeat. The humans had not simply won a battle, they had demonstrated technological and tactical superiority so complete that traditional military doctrine seemed obsolete. Our analysts believe their weapons operate on principles we don't understand, reported Chief Intelligence Officer Karras. The energy output of their smallest destroyer exceeds our largest battleships. Vortex's clawed hands drummed against his command desk as he processed the implications. The Razak Dominion had built its empire on military supremacy, conquering 47 worlds through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. The existence of a species that could defeat them so easily threatened the foundation of their civilization. What of their psychology? Vortex asked. Surely beings capable of such violence can be reasoned with, bought, or threatened. Karras accessed files compiled from interrogations of captured Razak personnel. That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect, Supreme Commander. They appear to fight purely for ideological reasons. No territorial claims, no resource extraction, no slave-taking. They simply protect others. The concept was so alien to Razak, thinking that Vortex initially dismissed it as propaganda. But repeated analysis confirmed that humanity had gained nothing material from their intervention at Ethos. They had expended resources, risked lives, and revealed their existence to protect strangers. It was behavior that defied every principle of rational self-interest. Similar conversations were taking place in council chambers across the galaxy as established powers grappled with the emergence of humanity. The Hegemony Alliance, which had maintained galactic stability through carefully managed conflicts, now faced a force that rejected their entire philosophical framework. Chancellor Aldrich of the Hegemony's ruling council addressed his fellow leaders from the Great Hall on Nexus Prime. The chamber had witnessed 10,000 years of diplomatic history, but never a crisis quite like this one. The humans represent an existential threat to established order, Aldrich declared. Not through conquest, but through example. If species believe they can receive protection without paying tribute, our entire system collapses. The assembled representatives of 43 civilizations murmured agreement. The hegemony had maintained peace by ensuring that smaller species remained dependent on greater powers for protection. Humanity's intervention at Ethos had introduced a dangerous variable into their calculations. What do we know about their military capabilities? Asked Admiral Thorns of the Hegemony Defense Force. More than we're comfortable with, replied Intelligence Director Nax. Their fleet at Ethos was apparently a rapid response force, not their main military. Long-range sensors suggest they have significantly more ships in reserve. The intelligence briefing painted a picture of a species that had prepared for interstellar warfare on a scale that dwarfed most galactic powers. Human shipyards produced vessels designed for prolonged conflict, while their military doctrine emphasized combined arms tactics that maximized effectiveness across multiple operational theaters. Back aboard the Harmony, Dr. Linnea Voss received a personal message that would change the course of her life. The transmission came from her homeworld, where the Zephyrian Council was debating their future relationship with humanity. Dr. Voss, Elder Korvac's image appeared on her private communication screen. The Council has voted to offer you a position as our first interspecies ambassador. Your insights into human psychology could prove invaluable as we navigate this new galactic landscape. Linnea considered the offer while watching human technicians work alongside Zephyrian engineers in the ship's engine room. The cooperation she witnessed daily demonstrated possibilities that transcended traditional species boundaries. "I accept," she replied, "but with one condition. The position must involve working directly with human diplomatic corps. We need to build bridges, not simply study each other from a distance." The establishment of formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the Zephyrians became the template for a new kind of interspecies cooperation. Rather than the traditional hierarchical relationships that characterize galactic politics, they created partnerships based on mutual respect and voluntary association. Admiral Kane found himself dealing with increasingly complex political situations as more species requested human protection. The latest crisis involved the Meridian Trade Federation, whose merchant convoys were being systematically raided by the Bloodclaw pirates. The attacks had escalated to genocide-level atrocities that demanded response. "Sir," reported Commander Chen, "the Meridian delegation is requesting immediate military intervention. They're offering to share advanced navigation technology in exchange for protection." Kane studied the tactical situation while considering the broader implications. Each intervention established precedents that would define humanity's role in galactic affairs. Accept payment for protection, and they became mercenaries. Refuse to help, and they abandoned their principles. "Signal the Third Fleet," Kane decided. "We're going hunting." The campaign against the Bloodclaw pirates demonstrated humanity's ability to project power across vast distances. Human hunter-killer squadrons tracked the raiders through hyperspace using techniques developed during Earth's colonial conflicts. When they found the pirate base hidden in an asteroid field, the battle was swift and decisive. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the destroyer Phoenix during the assault on the pirate stronghold. Her ship's sensors detected over 3,000 captured beings from a dozen different species, held in conditions that violated every principle of civilized conduct. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "the pirates are using captives as human shields. Standard bombardment would result in massive civilian casualties." Vasquez smiled grimly as she activated her ship's specialized systems. "Then we don't use standard bombardment. Launch the boarding pods." The assault that followed became legendary in military circles across the galaxy. Human Marines stormed the pirate base using powered armor and enhanced reflexes to fight through defended positions while protecting thousands of captives. The operation lasted 4 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of the Bloodclaw organization. But victory came with a cost that extended beyond mere casualties. Each successful intervention increased expectations that humanity would respond to every crisis, every injustice, every cry for help. The burden of being the galaxy's protectors was beginning to strain human resources and morale. Dr. Linnea Voss attended the emergency session of the newly formed Terran Protection Compact on the neutral station of Haven. Representatives from 23 species had gathered to address the growing crisis of expectations surrounding human intervention. "We cannot be everywhere at once," Admiral Kane stated bluntly. "Every week brings new requests for assistance. Pirates, slavers, aggressive empires, resource disputes. If we try to solve every problem, we'll fail at protecting anyone." The assembled delegates murmured in concern. Species that had pinned their hopes on human protection faced the reality that even Deathworlders had limitations. "Then what do you propose?" asked Ambassador Theric of the Altarian Republic. "Do we return to the old system where the strong prey on the weak?" Kane exchanged glances with Ambassador Rodriguez, humanity's senior diplomatic representative. They had discussed this moment privately, knowing it would eventually come. The galaxy needed protection, but it also needed to learn to protect itself. "We propose something different," Rodriguez announced. "The formation of a true defensive alliance will provide training, technology, and military advisors to help member species develop their own defensive capabilities. Human forces will serve as rapid response for the worst crises while local forces handle routine security. The concept was revolutionary. Rather than creating dependency, humanity offered to share the knowledge and tools necessary for other species to defend themselves. It was a solution that addressed both practical limitations and philosophical principles. Dr. Chen worked with Zephyrian scientists to develop training protocols that adapted human military doctrine to different species' physiologies and psychologies. The Zephyrians would never become warriors like humans, but they could learn to defend their cities and protect their people. The key is understanding that defense and aggression are different concepts, Chen explained to her mixed-species audience. You don't need to conquer others to protect yourselves. Similar programs began across human-protected space as species learned to take responsibility for their own security. The Meridians developed anti-piracy patrols using modified merchant vessels. The Altarians created planetary defense networks that could repel invasion forces. Each success reduced the burden on human military resources while strengthening galactic stability, but not everyone welcomed these changes. The Razak Dominion, humiliated by their defeat at Aethios, began forming alliances with other aggressive species. The Hegemony Council, threatened by the collapse of their tribute system, considered military action against human installations. Supreme Commander Vortex stood before the assembled warlords of the Razak military hierarchy, proposing a strategy that would test humanity's resolve. The humans cannot be everywhere simultaneously, he declared. If we coordinate attacks across multiple systems, their forces will be divided and vulnerable. We can reclaim our conquered territories while demonstrating that their protection is worthless. The plan that emerged from Razak's strategic planning represented the largest coordinated assault in galactic history. 43 aggressive species and pirate organizations would simultaneously attack human-protected worlds, forcing Earth's forces to respond on dozens of fronts at once. Intelligence about the planned offensive reached Admiral Kane through sources within the Hegemony Council. A faction of moderate species had grown uncomfortable with their leadership's increasingly hostile stance toward humanity. They're planning to hit 18 systems simultaneously, Kane reported to the emergency meeting of human fleet commanders. Our response time will be critical. Any delay could result in millions of casualties. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Linnea Voss, now serving as interspecies ambassador, proposed activating the newly trained local defense forces as first responders while human fleets moved to provide support. This is their test, she argued. The species we've been training must prove they can defend themselves, or they'll remain forever dependent on human protection. The Razak offensive began with coordinated strikes across 18 systems. Pirate fleets emerged from hyperspace to find not defenseless civilian populations, but organized resistance that had been trained by human military advisors. On Meridian Prime, Admiral Nexus commanded a fleet of converted merchant vessels that engaged the Bloodclaw successor organization using tactics learned from human instructors. The battle was fierce, but the local forces held until human reinforcements arrived. Similar engagements played out across the galaxy as species that had never fought back suddenly demonstrated the will and capability to defend themselves. The Razak had expected easy victories against helpless populations. Instead, they found prepared defenders who fought with human-trained skill and determination. Admiral Kane arrived at the Aethios system to find the Zephyrians successfully repelling a Razak assault using crystalline defense platforms and energy weapons adapted from their peaceful technologies. Dr. Linnea Voss stood in the Academy's command center, coordinating planetary defenses with the calm expertise of a seasoned military officer. How? Kane asked, genuinely amazed at the transformation. We learned that protecting our way of life sometimes requires us to fight for it, Linnea replied. Your people taught us that violence in defense of peace is not the same as violence for conquest. The failed Razak offensive marked the end of the old galactic order. Species across known space had witnessed both humanity's willingness to help others defend themselves and the effectiveness of organized resistance against aggression. The age of managed oppression was ending, replaced by a new era of cooperative defense. In the aftermath, representatives from over 100 species gathered on Haven Station to formalize the Galactic Protection Alliance. Unlike previous organizations that had maintained order through managed conflict, the new alliance was based on mutual aid and shared defense. President Rodriguez addressed the assembled delegates with words that would be remembered for millennia. We have learned that true security comes not from being stronger than your enemies, but from ensuring that good beings never have to face evil alone. Dr. Linnea Voss stood beside her human colleagues as the treaty was signed, watching species that had never cooperated before pledge to defend each other. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's answer to a single cry for help. The transformation was not without cost. Human military casualties had been significant, and the burden of galactic responsibility weighed heavily on Earth's population. But the alternative, a galaxy where the strong preyed on the weak without consequence, was unacceptable to a species that had learned the value of standing up to bullies. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Kane reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity had emerged from their quarantine system not as conquerors, but as protectors. They had answered one desperate call for help and discovered that sometimes the galaxy needed Deathworlders not for their capacity for violence, but for their willingness to use that violence in defense of those who could not defend themselves. The stars held new promise now, illuminated by the light of species working together rather than preying upon each other. The humans had taught the galaxy that strength without compassion was merely brutality, while compassion without strength was merely wishful thinking. The Deathworlders had emerged from their isolation, and in doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had never possessed: hope that the strong would protect the weak not for profit or power, but simply because it was right. The cosmos would never be the same, and for the first time in galactic history, that was exactly what it needed to be.